On PBS, where congressional subpoenas, executive privilege, and contempt of Congress. Is there a voting scandal behind the constitutional crisis in Washington? Now goes inside a secret Republican Party operation to use junk mail to disqualify voters and influence elections.
It was a partisan, discriminatory attempt to challenge voters of color.
Please be seated.
Now Congress wants to know if the Justice Department was also part of the plan to influence elections. One of those fired U.S. attorneys thinks so.
It's reprehensible, it's unethical, it's unlawful, it very well may be criminal.
And a neighborhood group that bucked real estate tycoons to create affordable housing in London.
It means that housing stock quite often comes available to anyone who's in housing need, who's got a connection from this area.
All that on Now with David Brancaccio. The weekly news magazine from PBS. Funding for Now is provided by the Orfila Family Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Nathan Cummings Foundation, the Desjardins Blackman Fund, the William B. Weiner Jr. Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS stations from viewers like you. Thank you. And by the Skoll Foundation, supporting enterprising ideas through a grant to the PBS Foundation. Now, from New York City, Public Broadcasting's David Brancaccio.
Welcome to Now. You're about to hear an important story that's been given far more attention overseas than by any news outlet here. It's the story that involves both your right to vote and to have your vote counted. Evidence has emerged that in the last American presidential election, the Republican Party organized efforts to suppress the votes of active duty military, low-income, and minority voters by challenging their registrations. One technique used to do that is something called voter caging. The BBC first broke an explosive piece of this story, and now the U.S. Congress is investigating whether voter caging was part of a broader effort to suppress the votes of groups likely to support Democrats. Brian Moyers produced our report. It's Election Day, November 2nd, 2004, and at polling stations around the country, lines are long. Americans are turning out to vote in the biggest numbers in years.
The first person here was 4:30 a.m. waiting in line, and since then it's been growing.
The Bush-Kerry contest has been a bitter one, Iraq dividing the nation in half. It's no secret this election is going to be close. Now, documents have surfaced showing that in 2004, the Republicans put in motion a plan to hold down the Democratic vote in key battleground states. Attempts to find out who ran that plan are at the center of this week's showdown between Congress and the White House. As more details become known, many are convinced that Republican officials broke the law by aiming to disqualify voters based on race. Greg Palast is an investigative reporter known for his strong critiques of the Bush administration. Palast doesn't work for an American television network, but for the British Broadcasting Corporation. Over the years, he's broken several stories about efforts to suppress the vote in Florida.
Do the Republicans have a plan to launch thousands of challenges on November 2nd and bring voting in Florida's black Democratic precincts to a standstill?
We recently caught up with Palast at his New York office.
This is a big problem in America. We're still asking today, nearly a half century after Martin Luther King was killed, do black people have the right to vote?
Evidence has emerged that in 2004, the Republican Party at both the state and national level had a plan to challenge hundreds of thousands of voters. Supporters of the Democratic Party had conducted massive voter registration drives that year to sign up millions of likely Democratic voters. The Republicans set up a program to have many of those registrations thrown out. Here's how it worked. The Republican Party sent these newly registered voters a friendly welcome letter. It began, "Congratulations." But what the Republicans really wanted to see was whether that letter could be delivered. If a letter could not be delivered, the name was added to a list of people the Republicans planned to stop as they tried to vote. What seemed like an innocuous piece of junk mail was really a test.
You don't lose your civil rights because you weren't around to collect a piece of junk mail or even first-class mail. It's not proof of anything when a letter comes back.
When the person walks in who's on the list, you can say, hey, are you supposed to be voting? Is that the idea?
Yeah, the idea is you don't want illegal voters, but that's not what's going on here. These aren't illegal voters. These are gotcha voters.
Many of those letters were sent to people who might have had a legitimate reason for not getting them, like students away at school or members of our military serving overseas. And to lower the chances the letters would reach them, the Republicans stamped the envelopes, "Do not forward." Greg Palast has obtained documents he says show how the grand old party did this in the state of Florida. He gave us a look.
This is the Republican Party's secret program for Election Day 2004. It says pre-election day operations. Okay, they're going to send first-class mail to all new registrants. And when the mail comes back, they said, be prepared to challenge anyone from this list attempting to vote.
This scheme of preparing lists of names from return mail is called caging. In and of itself, caging is not a crime, but what is a crime, says Palast, is targeting groups based on race. What patterns started to emerge as you start to probe into what are these addresses?
A few things. One, they're obviously voters, and two, they were obviously voters of a certain persuasion. They were black people, which is really pretty stinky stuff because you cannot mass challenge people, voters in America, under the Voting Rights Act. It's illegal if race is a factor. You just can't do it.
You are aggressively anti-Bush administration. Are you viewing these documents and this whole issue through some sort of partisan lens?
I'm anti every administration. I've had complaints from every party, Democrat, Republican, even the Greens. If they weren't complaining, I would think I'm not doing my job.
Keep in mind, the Republicans don't deny they were assembling caging lists. They just say it wasn't illegal. So we decided to see for ourselves where the Republicans sent some of their letters. One place was Jacksonville, the city with the highest percentage of African Americans in Florida. Edward Waters College is in Jacksonville. It's one of the oldest black colleges in America. Each year, the school conducts a voter registration drive among the students. So in 2004, the Republicans sent those students letters over the summer. Melvin Alston runs the school's counseling center.
The chances of a letter finding a student here in August is none. We don't have a whole lot of students that will be on campus in August.
A bunch of those letters got bounced back, so the Republicans added those students to their caging list. April Walker was put on the list. So was Larry Coleman and Angelica Ford. In all, 31 students were listed as potentially ineligible voters.
We encourage our students to vote. We encourage them to be a part of the political process. And when someone is tampering with that process, that is criminal.
You see lots of addresses on the same street.
That's right.
A lot of them close together. Right. What does that tell you?
Well, when you go through it, you're going to see poor people in crowded apartment buildings as opposed to suburban areas. You're going to basically see a map of black Jacksonville.
Even men and women serving in the United States military got caught up in the Republican sweep. Another batch of letters got sent to newly registered voters at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station. Some of those couldn't be delivered, presumably because the recipients were overseas for military